أعزائي المشاهدين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. نودع عام 2015 بعد أن شاهدنا خلاله وشهد العالم معنا الجرائم الإرهابية البشعة في باريس وتداعيات تلك العمليات الإرهابية التي ارتبط اسم الإسلام والمسلمين بها، والتي ما من شك أحدثت شرخا عميقا في مسيرة نجاحات وإنجازات الجالية برمتها. وما من شك أعزائي المشاهدين أن تلك الجرائم الإرهابية وما نجم عنها من مضايقات تعرض لها عدد من العرب والمسلمين قد وضع الجالية برمتها في مأزق نال من سمعتها وأعاق مسيرتها. يسدل الستار عن العام 2015 لنبدأ لعبة العد من جديد مع الدقائق الأولى لبداية العام الجديد، صفحات التاريخ بتسجيل وقائع سنة جديدة نتابع فيها ومعها التفاصيل اليومية الحزينة لتشريد وذبح الأطفال والشيوخ والنساء في سوريا والعراق وفلسطين، كما أن ما واجهه ويواجهه اللاجئون السوريون من قهر ومضايقات ومعاناة إنسانية أضاف لأحداث عام 2015 بعدا إنسانيا مأساويا ستبقى تفاصيله عالقة في أذهان الأجيال القادمة لعقود طويلة من الزمن. وعلى المستويات المحلية هنا في ولاية ميشيغان وفي منطقة ديترويت والضواحي شهد العام الحالي ازدهارا اقتصاديا خلق مئات الآلاف من الوظائف في جميع شركات صناعات السيارات والمؤسسات التعليمية والصحية والدوائر الحكومية، فيما انخفضت نسبة البطالة خلال العام الجاري إلى أدنى مستوياتها منذ عقد من الزمن. وبالرغم من عودة الحياة والعافية تدريجيا إلى مدينة ديترويت كبرى مدن الولاية واستثمار مليارات الدولارات في إجراءات إعادة بنائها، إلا أنها ما تزال تعيش مسلسل الرعب المتمثل بالجريمة التي يذهب ضحيتها صباح مساء أطفال أبرياء. ديترويت التي أجبرها حاكم الولاية قبل سنتين على إعلان إفلاسها لتنظيم وإعادة تصويب أمورها المالية ما تزال تحتل المرتبة الأولى بين المدن الأمريكية الكبرى من حيث عدد جرائم القتل الإرهابية التي لا تختلف كثيرا عن جرائم داعش ومثيلاتها. سنتناول بالحديث المقتضب عن هذه القضايا وأخرى كثيرة غيرها، ونحن نودع هذا العام ونستقبل آخر كما كنا دائما، وسنكون واضعين أيادينا المرتجفة على قلوبنا منتظرين نهاية لهذه المسرحيات المأساوية بمشاهدها المؤلمة المفروضة على شعوبنا العربية التي لا حول لها ولا قوة. سأتحدث أعزائي المشاهدين عن مجمل هذه المواضيع مع أحد أبرز الإعلاميين العرب الأمريكيين الذي عرفته الجالية ليس فقط في ولاية ميشيغان بل في ولايات الوسط الغربي الأمريكي إضافة إلى كندا، والذي كان يقدم البرامج الإخبارية ونشرات الأخبار باللغة الإنجليزية. تزاملنا لسنوات عديدة في منتصف تسعينيات القرن الماضي حين لم يكن لا محطات فضائية ولا ما تحزنون، فقط محطتان رئيسيتان، MEA أي هذه المحطة التي كانت تسمى تلفزيون الشرق وتلفزيون صوت المغتربين العرب. ضيفي هو الدكتور الإعلامي المخضرم جميل متي الذي كان يطل على الجالية العربية الأمريكية والكلدانية من خلال صوت المغتربين العرب. وفي نهاية تسعينيات القرن الماضي اتجه ضيفنا إلى الحقل الأكاديمي والكتابة والنشر، فهو بروفيسور متفرغ في كلية أوكلاند. نشر له كتابان، الأول بعنوان Perception War Iraq from Outside In، والثاني يتعلق بالأمور والقضايا الإيرانية التي سنتحدث معه عنها. أعزائي المشاهدين، إلى ضيفنا العزيز الزميل الدكتور جميل متي. أعزائي المشاهدين، أود أن أرحب بحرارة بضيفي البروفيسور الدكتور جميل متي الذي هو معنا بالاستوديو. أهلا وسهلا فيك دكتور جميل، كل عام وأنت بخير.
شكرا.
وبدي أسألك بداية، كيف استقبلت، كيف ودعت السنة الماضية 2015 وكيف استقبلت العام الجاري 2016؟
والله ودعنا 2015 وأنا صراحة متفائلا بالمستقبل. ودعنا 2015 وأنا أنظر إلى مستقبل حافل بالنجاح والطمأنينة والاستقرار، ولكن بنفس الوقت فكرت يعني المآسات اللي صارت بالسنة الماضية. فنحن دائما لازم نحاول أنه نقوم بقدر المستطاع أن نجعل حياة الآخرين طيبة وليس
صحيح.
لنا فقط.
And if you feel comfortable, Dr. Jemil, to speak in English, you are welcome to speak in English. I know that our community members, all of them are bilingual, as
yes,
you
exactly.
know.
Yes.
So let's talk about last year,
yes.
the year 2015.
Right.
What was the major point, the positive things that took place during the year 2015, and also the negative things?
Well, usually I like to start off with the positive. First of all, I think the city of Detroit is on the rebound. It really does help when you have the two major political figures, Governor Snyder and Mayor Dugan, working together to make that happen. So what we're seeing right now is that the city is revitalized. They're attracting new jobs. And you were right at when you earlier said that it was in the #1 city for crimes, but it has actually dropped a little bit on the list.
Still, I think it's still
it's
Detroit,
in the top five.
Yes,
the top 5.
Even though Detroit, it's not one of the major city, the 10 first city in terms of population.
So we have a lot of work to be done. But I'm very excited about Detroit's chances because I think Detroit is going to be the surprise within the next 5 years. Because remember, Detroit once fed the entire United States through its auto industry.
Right.
And I see that
it's coming back.
It's coming back. It's being revitalized. And so I'm very, very optimistic about Detroit's chances of getting its name back on the map where it belongs. Also, we're hearing about increasing communities. I know the crime rate is still unacceptable. I mean, yesterday I was listening to the news and I heard this one child who was opening up his gifts and he was shot.
Yes.
I mean, no child in Detroit or in Michigan really deserves
or in anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world. So when you hear something like that, it really catches your heart by surprise. So,
what is it as an educator when people talk about the crime, especially the crime in Detroit? It's a major issue. What is it that make Detroit one of the largest in terms of number as far as the crime is concerned?
Well, I think there are all kinds of issues gnawing at that question, not the least of which is the whole issue of equity, economic equity. I mean, we do need to create more job opportunities in Detroit, whereas, like I said, we've had situations where jobs were leaving Detroit. Now they're starting to come back, but we still really need to be more assertive about that.
People are talking, Dr. Jemil Metti, is that Detroit nowadays is divided between those who have and those who have nothing, absolutely nothing. And they are the majority of, unfortunately, African American.
Yes, and so really what we have to do is narrow the gap, the income gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I think the way we can do that is by increasing employment opportunities for everyone, for those who, because we're also going to be getting a lot of people from other parts of the world, refugees, what have you. We have to have a settlement plan for them too, and to help them to survive the challenges. But I still think that the United States and Detroit in specific has all kinds of opportunities that we should take advantage of. But the only way they're going to take advantage of the opportunities is by having appropriate education. The education has to match the economic demands.
Yeah, but Dr. Jemil Metti, as an educator, so many people refer the depression in Detroit and the lack of success stories, if you will, among most of the major cities in Michigan to education. This is a proof that, especially the last week result of the test that
Yeah.
was released by the state of Michigan, by the education department. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Yes, I think what you're referring to is the test that we call MSTEP.
MSTEP, yes.
And I think the biggest difference between this test and, let's say, the former MEA test that we used to have is that this test is online. And so from now on, all those tests will be online. And usually what happens when a new test kicks in, we go through the trauma of getting used to it. So not so surprisingly, usually when a new test like MSTEP comes up, usually at the very beginning, the scores are not as good. But once we get acclimated into the system, I mean, it's a paradigm shift for not just students, for the educators as well.
Is it very difficult test comparing to MEA
Yeah,
test?
let me just say,
because the result is really
Yeah.
horrible. I mean, 1 or 2% in math among certain school district in Detroit.
well, what's happening is that the MSTEP do truly reflect the highest of standards that the Michigan Department of Education has worked on. And the MSTEP is reflecting all those high standards and benchmarks. So it's up to us, the school districts, that really have to make sure that our students are ready to take these tests. But a lot of things can happen at the local district where we don't have to keep pointing to the state to help us out. For example, as an educator, I'll even share this with you that you know, I have a lot of students walking into my classroom and I say, well, tonight you need to read this. Oh, Mr. Metti, you need to know we don't read. It's almost like they say they're like a badge of honor.
Wow.
And I said, and especially if they're from our community, I said, you know, we have a saying in Arabic, "Man 'allamani harfan sartu lahu 'abdan," which means that we put a lot of emphasis on education. And then if we like to take the position that we are truly the descendants of the cradle of civilization, how could we in this 21st century say that we don't like to read when the first letter, when the first notion of time and measurement came from our part of the world?
And
it's just an
you're referring
ironic.
this to Arab American and or Chaldean or the mainstream perception and the way they respond?
I'm actually talking about some of the members of our community, the Arab American community, that I happen to have in my class.
Sure.
And it seems like they pick up on, well, we don't read. And I say, no, you've got to read. But I think, you know, we can get into more detail about that later. But I think things can change dramatically when parents do play a much bigger role. I know we tend to talk that a lot, but a lot of times we don't walk the walk.
Sure.
Just yesterday, for example, I was looking at the comparison between Asian American students and their performance versus the mainstream population, and that includes all of us.
Sure.
They tend to outperform and outscore, and they said the one major ingredient that really made the difference was parental involvement.
Sure.
The parents made sure that they read, that the parents made sure, even if the parents couldn't read, they made sure that they had everything they needed, the facilities, and then of course these students were pushed onto the Ivy League universities, they were pushed to take sciences and statistics and what have you, and I think everybody is capable of doing that. All we need is the parental commitment. It's very easy to play the blame game.
And this is also applicable to counties like Oakland and Macomb. I saw when they released the test result at Macomb, you know, it's under the average of under the state average as far as performance. So as Oakland County, and Oakland is the richest, or one of the richest and the most family type county in the United States of America.
Well, you know, you're looking, what you're referring to is the average of the scores.
Sure.
However, if you go to individual school districts, for example, I can speak for Wall Lake, we outscore and outperform the state standards. We're ahead of the state standards. But aside from that,
do you have an idea which district is the best in the state of Michigan? Or
I mean, there are several.
It's not in Wayne County, obviously.
Several states are distinguished. Several school districts, excuse me, are distinguished. Bloomfield Hills is very well known. Farmington, West Bloomfield, definitely. I mean, you know, we're looking at the top 5-10 that are mostly in Oakland County. But we want all kids to be educated. It doesn't matter what county they belong to. It really shouldn't matter what city or what county you belong to in order to get top-notch education. I'm sick and tired of those poor children in Detroit who are not getting the best that they deserve. What we're experiencing right now is a symptom that we call in politics de facto segregation, where because of economic factors, many of those who can leave Detroit are leaving Detroit. So what happens is you end up having a lot of empty school buildings, and they're having to close buildings, and it really reshuffles the whole financial picture in a way that doesn't work best for kids. But I'm seeing that's being worked on now that the city of Detroit is out of the bankruptcy status, and they're really focusing on using their money.
Do you
the money's
think,
much more efficiently.
Dr. Jemil Metti, and you are educator, and you have been in this business, if you
Since
will,
1978.
for years.
Yes.
I know you are very much familiar with all school districts, especially in Detroit area. Do you think the remedy will be charter school, as we, for the last 10 years or so, it's spreading all over the state, and the performance of this school is really unbelievable. Even in this particular test, which was the result was released a couple of days ago or last week, they are talking about 3 major charter schools in Detroit. They perform more ahead of any school in the city of Detroit, even in Wayne County.
Right.
Would be, in your opinion, the improvement will rest in something like charter school?
There's no such thing as a panacea in education. And there's no such thing as one solution that fits all. Sometimes charter school does have a place. In fact, some of the stats that I've looked at, and I think this will surprise you, have been mixed at best.
Sure.
So not all of them have performed according to expectations. In fact, we've had a few charter schools close.
Not in Michigan.
I'm speaking
about in Michigan?
Yeah, in Michigan. Well, and I'm speaking in general. I think this applies, though, to all the charter schools, regardless of where they're at. If they happen to have a proper mission and it's geared toward the right population, and they have the proper support from parents, I mean, nothing's impossible.
Sure.
I mean, it really depends on the commitment of parents and children and the support for the mission of the charter school. I mean, I see nothing wrong with the charter school for Chaldeans. They just opened one on the east side. And so I could see more charter schools fulfilling a specific need, but is it always the solution that fits all problems? No, it's not. So it all depends on how the school allocates the resources, where it sets its priorities. Are the teachers prepared to help diverse classrooms? And when I talk about diversity, I'm not talking about students just with special needs. I'm also talking about children who come from different backgrounds. And I mean, I was told recently that we're supposed to be getting some Syrian students coming into our district, and of course we got to be ready for them. And they're going to come with all kinds of issues, traumatized by war, and we have to be ready for that.
But don't you think that the government, the federal government and the state government sharply, drastically cut the bilingual education, which was
I think
the
they cut
70s
education
and
in general.
80s
Very
very popular. And did you think,
I think all the programs are affected.
People, students who newly came from various Middle Eastern countries, to adjust to the American culture and American way of life? Our students are in the ESL program for on average between 3 to 4 years, and after 4 years they tend to be pretty ready. But yet the research shows us that for the most part, for an ESL student to really acclimate to our environment, it could take anywhere between 5 to 7 years to develop what we call academic language. The social language, the spoken language, that could take anywhere between 1 to 3 years. That's what we call a playground English. That's different than academic English. The English where reading and writing is involved. That takes a little bit longer because that's literacy. Sure.
So, and yes, a lot of our kids have done well, but some kids who are in survival mode, and we should not be surprised to see that, especially if they have to work to feed their families. Sometimes we have parents living in Wall Lake where they have to work 2 or 3 jobs, and the kids can help. When they're in survival mode, education tends to take a back seat. But if they're like 2nd or 3rd generation, I think education becomes a lot more important.
I know, Dr. Jemil Metti, that you can talk about education not only in Michigan, and on the international level for hours and hours. And maybe we can appropriate an hour, especially for education and comparison between the American education and the international. In general, we will talk about it, but I want to conclude this segment by asking you, you said earlier that you are optimistic about the future of Detroit, and you are optimistic about the education system in general in
Right.
Michigan, particularly in the city of Detroit. Are
Right.
you?
Yeah,
And to what extent?
I am. Well, I am because I think the officials are now, they get the message.
Mm-hmm.
They realize what's wrong, what needs to be corrected. And I think they're trying to keep politics out of it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We still have ways to go. I mean,
Sure.
let's make no mistake about it. That's why I'm giving it a grace period of 5 years. But I'm very optimistic of Detroit's chances. I mean, all you have to do is just go downtown Detroit and see all the areas that have been renovated. I mean, I'm looking at opportunities. Every new light that goes into a neighborhood that was once completely dark
Sure.
is dropping down in the crime rate. People are becoming more involved. When there's an issue, we see communities coming together trying to solve a particular crime. And in fact, a lot of the crimes would never have been solved had it not been for the direct cooperation of the citizens of Detroit. See, I teach at OCCRA Loc, and
Sure.
quite a few of my students come from Detroit. And so they give us their scenario.
And it seems that everybody is involved. The federal
Absolutely.
government, the state government,
Yes.
the mayor of Detroit, the new mayor of Detroit is getting a lot of support from especially the congressional Michigan congressional
Representatives.
the delegation in Washington.
Yeah.
A couple of months ago, the Congress Appropriation Committee appropriate, I think, $137 million
Yeah.
to demolish houses in Detroit, and there are thousands of
Exactly.
thousands of
That's
houses.
what I'm referring to my optimism.
Sure.
So whenever we turn empty homes into new homes and to attract people to come back into the community, I mean, those to me are all positive signs, and they take time. They're not going to happen overnight.
Sure, absolutely.
That's why I'm giving it more between like 5 to maybe 5 to 7 years. But I'm more inclined to vote for the 5. And I'm already seeing a lot of changes in Detroit. What we need to do, though, as educators, we really have to provide education for our kids that's relevant. You don't want them getting into areas that are marketably irrelevant. So, for example, I heard the governor telling us the other day that there's something close to like 15, 20,000 jobs they can't fill because we don't have the people with that technical training.
I remember 10 years ago, or maybe more, the federal government appropriates money for community colleges, including Oakland County Community
yes, they
College,
did.
to create
Yeah.
vocational trainings
And that's where
for
we are.
those who are skilled,
Yes.
for who came from various countries, foreign countries,
Right.
and rehabilitate them or retrain them
Exactly.
in a position that it will
Yeah.
be needed in Michigan. And you
Absolutely.
are very much familiar with this,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Let's talk about Dr. Jemil Metti, the author. You
Okay.
are
Now we're turning
writer.
the page. Yes.
Yes.
That's another of
And
my
you
passions.
you already wrote 2 books,
Right,
one a
yes.
novel and one
Biography, personal biography.
Let's talk about one first. Then,
Yes.
if we have time, we'll cover the second book.
Absolutely, yes.
I want a summary of the book about
Perception
Iraq,
Wars.
Perception Wars.
Iraq from the
Iraq
outside in.
inside. Yes.
Well, this book, I could say, was quite an accident. And I'll tell you why, William, because I used to be on a multicultural team where we used to go to different school districts and we go to different colleges to talk about the backgrounds, things that they need to know as they work with our students in their classrooms. So typically, of course, I represented the Arab Chaldean community. We had a spokesperson who represented the Japanese, Russian. We had about 5 or 6 different languages. And we had a dynamite lady who, I think you know her name, Jackie Mosberg.
Oh, absolutely.
From
yes.
Oakland Schools.
Sure.
That I was part of her team, and we used to go around and travel. So listen to this, William. Every place that I went, invariably I'd get 1 or 2 people who come to me and said, "Why aren't you writing this stuff?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" They said, "We haven't heard story like yours, quite like this, because you kind of did everything backwards.
Sure.
Instead of coming from Iraq and staying in the United States, you were born in the States and then you went to Iraq." So they said that in and of itself.
And this is what happened. This is the true.
This is the truth, yeah.
You born in the United States
born
and
in the
you
United
went back to Iraq?
Yes, when I was
so
6
the
years
other
old.
way around.
The other way around.
Okay.
But we had a tragedy in our family. I lost my mother. I was 2 months old.
Okay.
And my father was left alone with 4 children, the oldest being 6, the youngest being 2 months. So between having nannies and in boarding school, he had no choice but to go back.
Boarding school here or in Iraq?
Here and in Iraq.
Okay.
So, you know, it was a very difficult trip for my father, but he went back because his brothers, his, my uncles and my aunts were all there. And let me tell you, they welcomed us. You know, I still remember their warmth and their kindness. And, but I think it was because of that tragedy that he made the move. He had every plans of staying in the States. I mean, he had every plans because my mother was Hungarian, by the way.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You
look Hungarian.
That's what they tell me. But she really loved it here, and we loved New York. And but you know, unfortunately, situations changes things and circumstances, so we went back to Iraq. And I tell about
what was the circumstances that brought you back to America?
Well, that's a really good question because you know I'm a 6-year-old boy and I understand nothing about Iraq's environment. After almost a year after we came back, I was back in 1957. I stayed 1 year in Lebanon between 56 and 57. And then in 1957, I went to Iraq. I went to Adil private school, and then I went to Madrasa Qadis Yusuf Al Ahliya, St. Joseph private school. And then I went to Baghdad College, which is truly a bilingual high school. All our courses across the board were taught in 2 languages, Arabic and English. We studied physics in Arabic and English, but by different instructors. It was the same topic, same coverage. But
all Arabs, obviously.
Yeah, all of the Iraqi students, absolutely. So this school helped me to learn Arabic properly, but also it helped me to preserve my English. So the book goes into that.
Right.
And then, you know, to answer your question, what is that brought me back here? You know, all the years that I lived there, because of the instability of governments and overthrows of governments, I was in constant fear. I didn't focus on my studies as well as I should have. And so I had some experiences of having to repeat certain classes. I was desperately trying to get out, so that was really the reason why.
So much of the book about Iraq cover your childhood, if you will, and
my childhood and how events influenced us. But I also try to talk about how the Iraqis perceive themselves vis-a-vis the region and the rest of the world.
Really, and how they are perceived by other, or
how they perceive themselves and how they perceive others.
Okay.
That's why, and the reason why I call the book Iraq from the Outside In, because I was born in the States and then I went to Iraq from the outside in.
Would you go back to Iraq now? Under these horrible circumstances?
You know,
obviously not.
Let me put it this way. My father was buried, you know, he was supposed to be buried in Baghdad, but he was buried in Baquba.
Okay.
And the last word that I got was that his cemetery site was disturbed with all the events that happened. I mean, even the dead were not left alone. Because you know how we say, may they rest in peace? I mean, we mean that literally, but unfortunately, his burial place was disturbed. And I couldn't even attend the funeral at the time when he passed away. So I really haven't come to closure. So for no other reason, I'd really like to go back to at least have a chance to put a flower in his tomb. And that has not happened. And so what happens in Iraq affects all of us, those who want to go back and to see this whole country revitalized again.
How long did it take you to write the book? And when did you start doing it?
That's a really good question because I actually started in 2000 and I didn't publish it until 2008.
Really?
To be honest with you, William, the book was twice the size. I took out a lot of stuff. I wasn't sure I was ready to put a lot of stuff out there. In fact, a couple of my cousins had, you know, I gave it to them and I asked them to read it, and they made a couple of suggestions about taking stuff out, and I actually did take them out because I felt that they had sensitivities that I probably didn't revisit, so I took care of that. And it was very painful, but it did one thing for me. It kept me honest, especially when you're writing in the first person. I and me, you keep putting the light back on you, and this is how I perceived it, this is how I was. I mean, I even have a chapter, for example, how, you know, what does it mean to, what does sex education mean in Iraq? And how did that impact, you know, things like that. I get into very, and the reason why I wrote this book, because I was trying to reach out to Chaldeans who had a similar background like me, because I don't think I'm the only one. I doubt it.
Is it well known in our community, in the Arab American and Chaldean community? I mean, this book, or your books, the two of them, and I'm sure that you are planning to write
I'm working on right now the second album.
Written in English, or are there any plan to translate them to Arabic or
I'd love to do that.
for that matter?
I'd love to do that, but
we talked about that before.
But, we talked about it before, but it's extremely expensive to do that. I also want to be able to have it on recorded.
Uh-huh.
I want people to have a chance to hear it.
Right.
I mean, I have one cousin, for example, who's visually impaired. She can't see, and she's begging me, say, I want your books to be recorded. And I haven't been able to because it is very, very, very.
How is the feedback from those who already read it? I mean,
that's
receiving so many emails and letters and phone calls.
Actually, I have to be honest with you. It's I average like one a month, something like that.
It's not bad. I mean, considering the.
Well, without really good aggressive marketing.
Sure.
But what I did is I became part of a website. It's called Goodreads.com.
Sure.
And I became part of a giveaway program where I actually gave my books for free. And I had very positive reviews for the Pahlavi sword.
Uh-huh.
And for the book itself, I probably only had 1 or 2 comments about the Iraq, which was also very positive. So I'm hoping that people will read it and encourage them to write their story, because that's really what I want. Because there's so many stories out there in the community, people who can really express what they've been through. Because even though I write about certain facts that happened to me, they were my facts. I'm sure other people have a different version of the same event. So we need to hear that perspective too.
Let's talk a little bit about the Pahlavi sword.
Yes. Okay.
What is it all about?
Well, it's basically about a member of Savak, which was the secret police. And the book starts this way, where he actually realizes that what he's doing was far from his moral fiber. So from the get-go, you get a sense that he's not comfortable with what he's doing. He loved the Shah, he was dedicated to him, but he did not like working for Savak. And basically what happens is he gets into trouble because of that. And that's kind of where the book takes off. And I've had people who've read the book telling me that they couldn't sleep for 3 nights after they read the book, because it scared the living daylights out of them. Every chapter you go through, they said, we have no idea what's going to happen next. So I hope that...
Suspense.
It's very suspenseful. I started writing in 2009, and I didn't finish till 2013. Because, I'm an educator.
So how did you get all of this information? I know that it's science fiction, right?
No, it's not science fiction. It's actually historical fiction.
Historical fiction.
Yeah, I do refer to certain events that did happen in Iran's history. Well, why don't you ask me how?
I mean, how did
I get around to writing it?
Right. And also,
it was an accident.
Okay, you answering.
It was also an accident. I was actually doing my graduate work in State University of New York in Binghamton, and I was just on the verge of graduating, and my advisor, Dr. Helen Revlin, she said, it's a shame that here you are, you've written about Egypt, you've written about all these countries, but you've done nothing about Iran. How could you call yourself a Middle Eastern?
Even though you've never been in Iran.
And I've never been in Iran, by
Wow.
So I said, okay, Dr. Revlin, what do you want me to do? So I did the study. This was in 1976, remind you.
Sure.
And things were starting to churn up inside Iran. A lot of voices of protest against the Shah was starting to emerge. So she said, you must do something about the current situation in Iran. So my paper became the religious opposition in Iran.
So you could not at that time reverse the revolution.
No, not at all.
So you decided to write a book.
No, I went ahead and wrote the paper. And after I wrote the paper, I said, wouldn't it be interesting if I wrote a story about this? And I wrote a 10-page outline, and Walid, I put it away.
Wow.
From 2009, I didn't take a look at it until 2000. From 1976 until 2009. I didn't even touch it. And then I looked at it and said, oh, okay, I think I'm ready to do this. And I worked with it. So I started working on the book in 2009, and I ended 2013. And I'm really proud of it, because it took a lot out of me. I discovered a lot about myself. I did not. What was weird is that when I came back and I looked at the outline, I added as I was writing the book, some new characters emerged that weren't in the original design. It's kind of like the characters force themselves on.
What does it take, Dr. Jemil Metti, in order? I don't know the process. You are working at a university. You are a professor. What does it take for a professor to include your book, or yourself to include your books in the curriculum, and to teach them to those who are involved in Middle Eastern studies in general, or the historical study, or what have you?
Well, right now, the only reason why I haven't thought about that is because my stories tend to be Well, my novels are historical fictions. So just the fiction of itself would disqualify it. Now, I could see...
Maybe it can be a supplemental
Right,
to
yeah.
a book about the history of Iran,
Right, yeah.
the modern history of Iran, and this will give the student who are interested in Iran in general different
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. Again, I have to be honest with you, I have not thought about that.
But what is it?
But the biography, I think, is more relevant.
Because you have thousands of educational institutions in the United States.
Yeah, yeah.
If it starts at Oakland or at Wayne State University, it will spread.
Just so you know, University of Michigan, they have a copy.
Okay.
And MSU has a copy. So the universities have been more interested in the biography than they were in the novel.
Okay.
Because the biography is actually an authenticated event, a series of events that happened in somebody's life. So it's one thing when you read about the general politics of the region. It's another thing when you read about the impact the policies had on individual lives. So you get a good sense of that from the book.
You as an author, I know that so many authors all around the United States of America, they always identify professors of history, for example, since you are writing about history, the novel. You send them a book. Is this the process, how they would adopt a book of, any book and then make it as a teaching material to their student?
Actually,
or it does not.
Okay,
it's
no.
not like this.
What can happen is this: if I was very serious about doing that, I would definitely have to approach my chairperson.
Okay.
And then I think he would have to take it to the committee for the political science discipline, and I think I would have to make a presentation to explain the merit of my introducing the book in the first place, and how it ties in with the general themes that are trying to be taught in that particular class. Does it meet the goals and objectives of the class? Does it help to propel
so
that?
It's not up to the discretion of the professor himself or herself?
You know, that's a good question, because I've heard where some professors actually made the students buy the book. I don't like to do that.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I think our students are already overcharged with expensive university books, and I don't think an author should be taking advantage of that. Now, if it had some curriculum merit and it helped to meet the goals and objectives of the course, I could see where I could talk to the college leaders and say, I'd really like my students because I think this is what will help them realize. Then I think I could swallow that. But for me to say, okay, guys, I know our book is not about the Middle East per se, but you need to buy this book. I can't do that.
I did not get your explanation of your past as it's related to the Pahlavi sword.
Yes.
Can you shed some light about this? What was the connection that make you write about this particular issue? Were you part of the Savak?
No, of course not. Oh, God, no. But no, it's a really good question.
At early age, maybe?
No, you're asking a very good question, because the real theme is that I was trying to take a stand against torture.
Okay.
As you know, there's a lot of, it's a common practice in many jails around the world, not just in the Middle East.
Yes.
And even though I wrote about Iran, this really applies to everyone. In fact, if you read the dedication, you can see immediately that I'm targeting those who are
domestic
engaged
violence
in violence, because what do you get from demeaning a person to something substandard? And I have to be honest with you, I have met and known people in Iraq who were in prisons, and I would just shake my head and say, I cannot believe that human beings would actually resort to such methods of ill treatment of others. So this is my simple, small way of taking a stand against torture, because we have, even though this is not written in stone or anywhere in the law books, but we do have a process that we follow where the person is guilty until proven innocent, when it should be the other way around. They should be innocent until proven guilty. And unfortunately,
I don't want you to talk a lot about or to explain. I want people to, or whoever watching us tonight, to buy the book and to read the book. But I want you to compare between the horrible crimes, especially committed by the Savak or the various Middle Eastern intelligence agencies, it's also horrible if you go to Egypt, to Syria, to Lebanon, wherever you go.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia.
And my biggest gripe was torture. The practice of torture.
Obviously,
I mean, that was my big thing.
Yeah. Compare it between what's happening now in Syria, what's happening in Iraq, the horrible crime that committed by ISIL.
Yes.
I mean, there is no comparison, maybe.
Yeah, when I think of that, I think of who their victims are, and they tend to be innocent people who cannot defend themselves.
In general, yes.
In general, women and children.
Sure.
And attacking people because of who they are, not because of anything they've done. I'm sure they're going to have their day in judgment in dealing with that. It's interesting how now we're starting to look at results that are different now that they're fighting another army instead of fighting or going after innocent people.
Sure.
So it's just very unfortunate that we have to witness such dehumanized treatment of others in the way that we've read it. It really saddens me every time I read about that. So that's why, all the more reason why I think we have to have an open mind when we start greeting our Syrian refugees, because only God knows what.
And this is before we entered the studio, we were talking about the Syrian refugee. Would you be able to, I'm sure that you are able to touch on the human part of the Syrian refugees who are scattered all over the world, and you are capable of writing a lot of details, but that takes time.
It does, yes.
Energy,
it does, yes.
money. You have to travel to maybe Syria, to various Middle Eastern countries, to Europe, and to talk to refugees.
Or if I don't try, I mean, there's nothing better than being there on site, but a lot of times it's not very easy. In fact, there have been several, just to give you an example, there have been several researchers who, let's say, gone to Iran. There's this one lady who tried to look into the Kurdish problem.
Sure.
And she got a permit from the Iranian government to go there and do the investigative work. And yet it's because that she chose to interview a certain person who was, let's say, objected by the Iranian authorities, and she ended up in Evin prison. You see what I'm saying? So it's not as easy just to walk in. You know, you can have your ideals of what journalism should be doing. Just this last year, they were mentioning on Radio France, TV France 24, something like in the number of 72 journalists around the world who died covering wars and events, or some of them who have been in jail and have been tortured. I mean, it's information should be a lot more accessible, but it isn't, because certain governments, especially dictatorships, do not like information to leak out.
What do you say, Dr. Jemil Metti, to those from within our community, the Arab American in particular, I'm not talking about the mainstream, who always respond to such a conversation about torture, about the role of intelligence agencies in various Middle Eastern countries? They would tell you, as American, look at what the American doing in their jails, and go to downtown Detroit, or just listen to the news of what's happening inside Detroit among the American. They are killing each other, they are torturing. Why don't you highlight this instead of talking about the Middle East? Every society, as you suggested earlier, engaged in this kind of violence. So most likely the reason for that, it's not the inequality of economic or life, style of living or things like that. What do you say to those people, to the Arab American, who are really, they speak in a strange perception about America in general? How do you, as American, defend the United States of America as a free society?
It's an interesting question that you ask, because the whole issue of Americans torturing came up during the Bush administration with waterboarding, if you remember that.
Torturing the Iraqi.
Yes, and what happened in Abu Ghraib. So it's not like we're completely immune from torturing, but we've had different responses. You had President Bush, who said, it helped to get us information, that somehow the means justify the ends. But then you had somebody like Obama said, that's not who we are. So generally speaking, if we abide by the Constitution, and if we respect the civil rights of every individual, torture should be out of the picture completely. But will I be naive enough to say that torture never happens? I would be dead wrong.
It's not an ideal society wherever
Sometimes
you go.
torture could be up here. It doesn't have to be physical. So unfortunately, it's a lot more common than we'd like to admit, but it's not the American way. It's not the way we process. In fact, I even have some cultural things about us that I don't like. The example that we use, al-asa liman asa.
So,
That should not be part of our children's education.
and it still
Because
exists,
once you use
unfortunately, yes.
the instruments of hitting, you deprive the child of its freedom of thought.
Right.
Because now, if I'm a student in class and I know the teacher's going to hit me, I'm going to say something so I don't get hit. I'm not saying something so I can learn. Hitting should never be a threat. It should never even be there.
But it's still practiced in the
It's still
majority of
practiced.
societies
Yes.
and the school system
Because
around the world.
If I keep getting hit for a mistake that I make, how can I learn from my mistakes?
That's true.
So that's the whole idea. We're not there yet. We're not there
As
yet.
educator and as a media person, well recognized in the 90s, in the 80s, you will know.
I think I'm forgotten
when,
right now.
when there was no satellite station,
yeah.
especially within our community,
Right.
all over the United States.
Right.
Do you see the media, the mainstream media, and the ethnic media in general helping eliminate all of these negative things that's happening, at least in the United States of America? What is the role of media as far as eliminating negative things that taking place all over the world, especially here?
Unfortunately, because of issues related to economics, related to territorial disputes, what have you, we're never going to eliminate any of that. What we can do is improve the environment so that we can minimize it, especially as more people begin to have their grievances addressed. But for us to be able to eliminate, I don't see that
When you
even
say
within the realms of
improve
possibilities.
the environment by education, by creating jobs, by what?
Well, here, let me give you an example. You just reminded me of something. For examples, we do have a lot of immigrants who come from Mexico to the United States.
Right.
Now, you can, if you're a candidate, I'm not going to even talk about the candidates, but you could be a candidate who might suggest the building of walls. I don't think that's going to keep the Mexicans out. I think what makes more sense
One of the candidates
I think what makes more sense is that if we go to Mexico and help them improve their economic lot, that will diffuse the reason why the immigrants want to come here in the first place.
And that's what the United States is doing, especially
That-
Ford
exactly.
Motor Companies
Yeah.
and major
All right.
companies from Detroit. They are spending or investing
And if you look at the
billions
past-
of dollars in Mexico.
And if you look at the past 2-3 years, guess what the Mexican immigration to America has been? Zero.
Yes.
They've seen just the reverse. A lot of people are going back. Because in interviews, a lot of would-be possibly green card holders were asked, why are you going back? They said, well, now we realize that life in America is either just as good or if not even that good.
Sure.
So for that reason, we've seen a negative growth in terms of the population coming from Mexico into the United States. So I'm really surprised to hear some of the candidates referring to constructing a wall as if that's going to keep people out.
And that's what's happening in the West Bank. And,
So,
between
exactly.
separating the
Yeah,
Israelis.
that's a
from-
whole
Yeah.
separate issue, but it's one that we're ignoring, and we're not really studying the ramifications of continuing the policies that we have there.
You have been involved in our community for a long period of time.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get away from talking about your two important novel and book, but I would like to hear your opinion about the journey, if you will, of the Arab American and Chaldean, for that matter, from, let's say, the 70s, early 70s, up to now. And you were really very important part of the media and education, and one of the most important education, which was bilingual education. It was flourished in the 80s and 90s. How do you see that movement, that path, from the, let's say, the 80s up to this moment now?
To be honest with you, I've been very impressed with the progress that we've made. I mean, think about this. When I first started with Faisal Arabu, who was the dean of the Arab Voice in Detroit, I mean, without him, I would have never had those opportunities. And I just look at the commercials that we used to do. At first, when I started, they were mostly about party stores. And gradually, as I got to 1984, 13 years later, there was so much diversity in our commercials. It wasn't just about party stores anymore. We were advertising doctors, we were advertising construction, we were advertising real estate holders, we were advertising all kinds of business, not just a party store. That in of itself was telling me that really our community has really been thriving, has really been moving forward. The one thing I hope we don't lose is the momentum that we have. And we could lose that momentum if kids are not interested in being curious. I mean, I actually tell this to my students at the college level, that if you lose that curiosity, you're never going to move forward. I mean, and the whole idea behind developing your curiosity is also trying to be networked. Because right now, as you know, when corporations interview people, it's not just about a resume. In fact, resumes are out. They actually follow you on social media to see how you conduct yourself, both personally and professionally. It's a very different world. So are we adequately preparing our kids for the 21st century? And I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Are we as a community?
Are we as a community?
And I know that you see and you interact with so many students from within our community. Maybe the majority of your students at the classroom are Arab American, ولا لا?
No. I do have, no, they are Chaldeans, but they've been here a few years, and it looks like they're going into the business track.
Okay.
And don't forget, these are middle schools. They have a lot of time between now and high school and college to change their points of views. But I always encourage them to read and to be, to be curious. I love it when, I could be reading about a science topic and they ask me all kinds of questions about science. And I say, they're curious about this. So I tell them, I said, look, I don't care what you read. I don't care if you read a magazine. I don't care online, offline. Read something you're curious about. And then once you're done with that reading, look at the table of contents, see where the author got his materials from, and start reading those materials. And before you know it, you have an arsenal of information about that one subject. Go after your passion. Sometimes the message gets through, but a lot of times it doesn't. I have to admit that.
Sure. I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Jemil Metti, for this beautiful conversation. أنا بشكرك جزيل الشكر على زيارتك لتلفزيون MEA، وبدي إياك توجه كلمة بالعام الجديد عام 2016 لأبناء الجالية اللي بهمهم كثير يعني متابعة ما يجري في الجالية وفي المجتمع الأمريكي من خلال هذا التلفزيون، من خلال ethnic media in general. I would like to ask you about ethnic media. Is it different than the mainstream, and in what way?
Well, it tends.
Let's start from this. Then you go back to to your message to the community.
To the outgoing message.
Outgoing messages.
The way I perceive it, it tends to cover the areas of concerns for the members of a particular community. So we're seeing this not only in the Arab American community or Chaldean communities. We're also seeing this in other communities, Albanians, Germans, what have you. They're starting to get the dishes to focus on the news that comes from their part of the world.
Right.
They want to have that connection. The only thing I hope does not happen is that it does not bar their curiosity or interest about where they're living. I'd like to see us becoming
connected,
more part of the mainstream instead of being passive onlookers. We need to be part of the action. If we're going to be agents of change, we have to be the change. Or else we're going to be still looking, to follow the topic that I have for my book. We'll still be on the outside looking in. We should be inside. We have to be part of the game.
Is it difficult, Dr. Metti, the process of integration, especially into this complex society that we live under?
Yeah, I mean, at first, you try to acclimate. I mean, the social English you can take care of between 1 to 3 years. You start making friends. You can still what I like the members of our community to do is to enjoy the best of both worlds. Your roots are your roots. You should never remove those, because your roots will determine how strong of an American you'll be. It's almost like an architect who's building a building. You got to have a strong foundation. The bigger you want the building to be, the stronger your foundation has to be.
And if you have strong, solid roots, you will never be able to assimilate into the new culture.
Well, no. It depends on It depends on.
Right, but
I mean, I think I have strong roots, but it has not interfered with my ability.
I'm talking about Dr. Jemil Metti, total assimilation to the American culture and American way of life, where you lose your roots and your connection to your beautiful values and beautiful culture.
If you're talking about becoming a mosaic of the society, where we're kind of like a salad bowl, you look into a salad bowl, you still see the tomato, you still see the onions, but if you're talking about melting pot, that's the danger. You're moving from one thing to another. You're moving from your roots and you're becoming something else.
And
it's almost like self-denial.
There are so many Arab American who came at the turn of the century and they assimilate completely.
Well, you can't blame them completely because many of them were discriminated against.
Right.
And they had all kinds of issues to deal with. So a lot of times, before we became, as Americans, aware of the Arab culture, there are all kinds of issues going on. So, for example, if the person was named Mahmoud Aswad, he changed to Mahmoud Black.
Right.
Just so that people would not use his background as an excuse. I think after the 1960s, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act, recognizing the civil rights of all Americans, we've encouraged the idea of belonging to something. So now, during the 1960s, we refer to our African American friends as blacks.
Sure.
After the Civil Rights Revolution, suddenly there was a pride in one's heritage and one's culture, and we became known as African Americans. So our heritage should be a source of pride. Okay, like
not
right now.
Not all of it, though. Not all of it. The best of it. The best of our values.
One of the first things that I learned coming to Iraq, they said, "Look, Jemil, when you go to a new culture, you take the fruit and throw away the peels. So just because you acclimate to a new environment doesn't mean you have to accept, what's not. They're a source of pride either. So you try to take the best of what the culture has to offer, and every culture has that.
Sure.
We have good and evil. We have,
Before we forget the message.
طبعا أحب أن انتهز هذه الفرصة لأهنئ الجالية بمناسبة قدوم الأعياد وكل عام وأنتم بألف خير.
أنا بشكرك جزيل الشكر على حضورك ومشاركتك، وإن شاء الله بتكون لنا لقاءات مستقبلية كثيرة، خاصة بالحديث عن راح نختار كتاب من الكتابين ونحكي عنه في المستقبل القريب إن شاء الله، ومننتظر إنتاجك الرائع إذا كان كله نفس الوتيرة. وشكرا جزيلا دكتور جميل متي، نتمنى لك التوفيق ويعطيكم ألف عافية. أعزائي المشاهدين، شكرا لإصغائكم ومتابعتكم، وحتى نلتقي في الأسبوع القادم لكم مني أجمل تحية والسلام عليكم.